Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. What would you do if a group of HOA officers marched onto your land, pitched tents, set up signs, and then handed you a bill to use your own property? I didn't think it was real at first, but that's how my quiet life turned into a full-blown legal war, with drones, drama, and one blazing finale. People say peace is a myth in the modern world, but I knew better because I lived it. My name is Kevin Larson. I'm 41, a woodworker by trade and a quiet man by nature. I live on 7 acres of land in southern Minnesota, nestled between a tree-lined bluff and a sparkling lake that turns to fire every evening with the setting sun. This land isn't just property, it's legacy. My grandfather passed it down to me, and with it, a simple philosophy. Some things are meant to be left untouched. That's why I've never built on the wide front field that opens to the lake. It's just grass, wildflowers, and sky. And that's the point. I've never belonged to any homeowners association, and I intend to keep it that way. My land sits a good 2 blocks from the nearest HOA-controlled neighborhood, Sunny Ridge Living. The name says it all. Faux Tuscan facades, 6 kinds of ornamental grass, and an army of clipboard warriors policing lawn hues and mailbox heights. I kept to myself, they kept to theirs, and that was the balance. I wasn't part of their community and had no interest in HOA barbecues or quarterly flyers about neighborhood spirit. My land was my boundary, spiritually, legally, and literally. I spent my mornings with coffee on the porch, watching deer step cautiously through the fog. The afternoons I used to craft furniture in my workshop out back, and the evenings, well, those belonged to the sky. I never expected trouble, least of all from a group of people who weren't even my neighbors in the legal sense. But peace, as it turns out, is a magnet for people who want to tame it. The first sign came subtly. A blue car slowly driving past the edge of my property. A man with sunglasses taking photos. At the time, I brushed it off. Nosy looky-loos, maybe a lost realtor. But if I'd known then what I know now, I would have started building the fence that very day. I remember the exact morning everything turned upside down. I walked out barefoot, mug in hand, expecting to be greeted by the familiar sound of birds and the rustle of wind across my open field. Instead, I was greeted by flags. Dozens of bright orange plastic flags staked along the edge of my field, forming a neat perimeter. A tent had popped up overnight near the center, big and white, with sides flapping lazily in the breeze. Another smaller canopy stood closer to the road, next to a folding table topped with clipboards, cones, and a printed sign that made my stomach drop. Sunny Ridge, HOA Recreation Zone, members only, parking 5 RSR. I stood frozen on the edge of my porch, blinking as if that might reset what I was seeing. 2 men in matching reflective vests were busily moving cones around near the driveway to my field. My field, as though they were city workers prepping for a parade. I set my mug down and walked, barefoot still, across the gravel. My voice was calm, but my heart was pounding. "Excuse me, what exactly is going on here?" One of the men turned, smiling like he'd just finished arranging the salad bar. The other, a stockier guy holding a tablet, stepped forward and spoke like a mall manager delivering bad news with customer service polish. "Mr. Larson, right? We're from the Sunny Ridge Living HOA. We've designated this lot as a temporary event and recreation area for our seasonal programming." I stared blankly. "This lot?" I repeated. "You mean my land?" He smiled wider, clearly prepared for that one. "Oh yes, technically the parcel belongs to you, but per our recently submitted community integration map, this area is now recognized as part of our extended access zone, zoned for temporary community recreation." Community? What? I asked, unable to process the sentence. He tapped the tablet, spun it toward me, and there was a brightly colored graphic, complete with logos, arrows, and the phrase, Community Wellness Corridor. My land was outlined in green, as if I had suddenly become the proud owner of a YMCA branch. "You can, of course, continue to reside here," he added quickly, "but because of the new zoning and HOA integration guidelines, you'll be billed $1,200 per month for shared recreational access." That's when I laughed, not a chuckle. Not an "I'm uncomfortable" laugh, a full head-thrown-back laugh of pure disbelief. "This is a joke," I said. "It's not," he replied as he handed me a formal printed invoice, laminated no less, with today's date, a QR code, and the words, "Due upon receipt." "You've lost your minds," I said. The second man stepped in then, trying to play the reasonable one. "Sir, we sent a notice 3 weeks ago. Certified mail. You must have seen it." "I didn't," I snapped. "And even if I had, this is private land. I'm not part of Sunny Ridge. Never have been." "Actually," he said, and now his voice had a certain slimy tone, "your property was recorded under Transitional Community Overlay in the revised survey submitted last month. It's all perfectly legal." So was the Boston Tea Party, I muttered. I turned on my heel and stormed back to my house. As I walked, I passed a parked minivan on the grass, its wheels sinking into the field I'd kept pristine for years. A plastic placard on its dash read, "Sunny Ridge Yoga and Nature Morning." I don't know what was worse, that these people had the nerve to seize private land, or that they did it wearing matching polos and smiling like missionaries. I slammed the front door behind me and grabbed my phone. If they wanted war, they just found it. The first thing I did when I got back inside was pull open the drawer with my drone remote. I hadn't flown it in a while, but this situation screamed for aerial evidence. I launched it from the back deck and guided it up with a steady thumb, watching as the screen filled with a nauseating sight. My once pristine field now looked like a summer fairground. There were 5 vehicles parked along the edges, 3 minivans, a pickup, and an electric sedan with a Sunny Ridge HOA volunteer magnet slapped on the door. 2 large tents were pitched dead center with folding chairs arranged in little circles. Kids were running around with frisbees, and someone had set up a portable speaker, blaring what sounded like smooth jazz covers of Coldplay. It wasn't just obnoxious, it was trespassing at industrial scale. I hit record and took a slow pan of the entire area, documenting everything. Signage, people, license plates, even the plastic trash bags already starting to pile up beside one tent. I wanted more than proof. I wanted a visual indictment. After landing the drone, I called my attorney, Mrs. Grayson. She listened patiently, then said 3 words. "Send me everything." While she dug into the legal side, I dove into property records. I dug out the original plat maps from my filing cabinet, scanned the most recent survey I'd had done when I installed solar panels, and pulled county GIS maps online. All of them confirmed the same thing. The field is entirely mine. No easements, no shared usage, no overlaps. The borderline between my property and the nearest HOA-controlled lot. 416 feet of untouched, separately deeded land. But that's when the twist hit. Grayson called back the next day, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "Keen," she said. "I looked into the zoning changes that Sunny Ridge filed last month. There's a document, a proposed boundary adjustment, that incorrectly marks part of your parcel as community adjacent." What the hell does that even mean? It means they submitted paperwork suggesting your land could be folded into a community usage overlay. But here's the kicker. It wasn't reviewed by the city yet. It was just filed, and someone at the HOA ran with it like it had passed. So this wasn't just arrogance. This was a premature land grab based on paperwork that hadn't even cleared a clerk's desk. These people didn't just trespass. They weaponized bureaucracy and counted on no one noticing. Oh, but I noticed. That evening, I printed a massive 3-ink copy of my legal plat and stapled it to a sheet of plywood. I hammered it right into the middle of the field, next to their yoga sign with a handwritten note in red marker. "Private land, not part of HOA. Trespassers will be photographed, billed, and featured online." I wasn't bluffing. I bought a motion-activated trail cam from the hardware store, stuck it in the tree line, and redirected my front porch camera to face the field. Within an hour, a woman in yoga pants marched up, took a selfie with the sign, and flipped off the camera. I smiled and saved the clip. The next day, I posted it, blurred face and all, with the caption, "Sunny Ridge, HOA believes this is their land. I call it Tuesday." It got 43,000 views in 5 hours. War had officially begun. The gloves were off. Mrs. Grayson didn't waste time. She drafted and submitted a formal cease and desist letter to the Sunny Ridge HOA, citing trespassing, unlawful commercial use of private land, and unauthorized modification of land boundaries without consent. It was addressed to the HOA's president, a man named Harold Bixley, a former insurance auditor who now treated lawn care as a divine calling. Grayson's letter was clinical, ironclad, and just spicy enough to imply we were ready to take their little yoga ranch all the way to federal court if need be. Simultaneously, I filed a report with the county sheriff's department and the city code enforcement office. Turns out, if you want to charge people to park on land you don't own, set up structures without permits, and hold group events, you need actual authorization. Who knew? But I didn't stop there. If they wanted a spectacle, I'd give them one, with better lighting. The next morning, I built a barricade. Not just any barricade, a ridiculous, over-engineered, glorious eyesore of a blockade made from recycled construction fencing, leftover lumber, and, my favorite touch, a 10-foot wide banner that read, "Welcome to Kevin's Lawn, now a 10,000 day." Event space. HOA. Staff pay double. I set up a fake check-in table with a plastic cash box, filled it with Monopoly money, and put a mannequin in a security guard shirt behind it. His name tag read Greg. Greg wore aviators and held a Nerf gun. From a distance, he looked vaguely menacing. Up close, he looked like he'd taken too many foam darts to the brain. I also added signs along the property line. By entering this field, you agree to the terms of our nonsense. Don't like it? Good. Neither do I. Meanwhile, I kept the drone flying every other day, uploading videos to my YouTube channel, which had recently exploded from 83 subscribers to over 10,000. One video, where I narrate the HOA's setup while sipping lemonade and zooming in on their recreation zone sign, was shared by a local journalist and labeled, "Suburban HOA tries land grab, owner goes full Gandalf." Soon, neighbors started coming. Out of the woodwork, people I'd never even met, offering support, emails, and even lawn chairs to join my blockade vigil. One guy from down the road dropped off a cooler of beers with a note that said, "For Kevin's Freedom Front." But not everyone was amused. On day 3 of the barricade, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat and HOA lanyard stormed up to my fake check-in booth and demanded to speak to whoever's in charge. I pointed to Greg. She didn't laugh. "Mr. Larson," she barked, "this is a serious violation of community harmony." "Ma'am," I replied, "this isn't a community. It's private property. Your community is over there, behind the line where the grass gets aggressively trimmed." She went straight for the sheriff's office that afternoon. Good. So did I. The deputy assigned to the case, a guy named Ron who had the calm energy of a sleepy dog, visited my property with a clipboard and a smirk. "Well, you sure made it hard to miss where your land begins," he said, glancing at the barricade. "Can't say I've seen a Nerf-wielding mannequin before. I'm impressed." He looked at my documentation, reviewed the drone footage, and nodded. "This is solid. If they keep pushing it, we'll get the DA involved." But honestly, they're walking straight into a lawsuit. I offered him a lemonade. He accepted. By that evening, the HOA had sent me a tersely worded letter claiming my signage was creating visual discord for the surrounding community. I framed it and hung it in my bathroom. They still hadn't taken down their tents, but neither had I. I always thought courtrooms were quiet, serious places. Turns out, they're also fantastic venues for public humiliation, at least when the HOA is the opening act. It took 3 weeks for the case to hit the district court. During that time, Sunny Ridge doubled down. They didn't just deny wrongdoing. They countered with a statement claiming I had benefited financially from public use of the land and thus retroactively owed community service fees. They even accused me of harassment through sarcasm. I almost asked the judge if I could plead guilty to that one. When the day came, I walked into the courthouse wearing a pressed flannel shirt, jeans, and my boots because I was showing up as the landowner they tried to erase, Mrs. Grayson, my attorney, looked like she could slice a man in half with her earrings alone. She walked beside me, clutching a binder thicker than the HOA's codebook. Opposite us, Harold Bixley sat stiffly in a beige suit that screamed golf tournament funeral. He was flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they'd spent most of law school arguing about soup temperature. One of them tried to flash me a smug smile. I responded with the calm nod of a man whose drone footage was already in the judge's hands. The courtroom filled quickly. Press, curious locals, and even a few HOA members who probably just wanted to see Bixley crash and burn. The judge, a stern woman with the last name Dalton, called us to order, and just like that, the circus began. Grayson opened with a timeline of events so precise it felt like watching a Netflix true crime documentary. She presented drone footage, survey maps, emails, the laminated invoice they handed me, and even the footage of kids playing frisbee over my boundary line, complete with timestamps. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as she played a video of one HOA officer saying, "I mean, if he isn't using the field, what's the harm?" Then came my favorite moment. Grayson slid the laminated invoice across the table to the judge. Your Honor, here is the billing document issued by the HOA, charging my client Inasu $200 per month for the right to use his own land, which they had unilaterally claimed as theirs. The judge raised an eyebrow so sharply it could have cut through drywall. Then it was their turn. HOA's lead attorney stood up, adjusted his tie dramatically, and delivered what he must have thought was a monologue of Shakespearean weight. Your Honor, we submit that community cohesion requires a degree of fluidity when it comes to land use. Are you implying the law is fluid? Judge Dalton interrupted, peering over her glasses. He froze. I mean the interpretation of... Dalton waved him off. Continue. They tried everything, blaming clerical errors, miscommunication, enthusiastic volunteers, even citing community wellness initiatives. At one point, Bixley himself took the stand and earnestly claimed they'd added my land to the recreational map to bring people together. When Grayson cross-examined him and asked if he had any written consent from me, he stammered. We assumed. Silence implied consent. Judge Dalton leaned forward. Mr. Bixley, that is not how property rights work. The verdict didn't take long. She ruled in our favor on every count. Trespassing, unlawful commercial use, unauthorized boundary manipulation, and defamation by implication. Then came the kicker. The court finds Sunny Ridge HOA in gross violation of multiple property statutes. Mr. Larson is to be compensated $120,000 in damages, plus full legal fees, and an additional $15,000 for emotional distress and reputational harm. Furthermore, all structures placed on the plaintiff's property must be removed within 48 hours, and an official public retraction and apology must be distributed to all HOA members by the defendant. Bixley looked like someone had just punched him with a cease and desist letter. One of his lawyers slumped visibly. In the back of the room, I swear someone clapped, then several more joined in. When we stepped out onto the courthouse steps, a local journalist shoved a mic toward me and asked, "How do you feel about the outcome?" I grinned. Pretty good for a guy who got billed to watch the sun set on his own land. Justice doesn't arrive with a trumpet fanfare. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a hot Tuesday morning and a sweaty, deeply humiliated HOA crew trying to fold up tents without looking at anyone in the eye. 48 hours after the court ruling, I sat on my porch with an ice-cold lemonade and my feet up, watching the final act of this absurd play unfold. A white HOA van pulled onto my property, my very clearly marked property, and out stumbled 3 volunteers in matching Sunny Ridge polos, dragging poles, folding signage, and trying not to step in the soggy imprint of their own arrogance. I had cameras recording from 3 angles, plus a drone circling like a curious hawk. I wasn't just documenting, I was immortalizing. As the first tent deflated with a sad whoomp, one of the men, red-faced and grumbling, tried to yank out a stake and fell flat on his back. I nearly choked on my drink. "Careful," I called helpfully. "Wouldn't want to violate your own safety regulations." From the road, neighbors had gathered like it was a local parade. A few brought folding chairs. One guy grilled hot dogs from the back of his truck. It felt like the entire block had turned out for the HOA's Walk of Shame, Field Edition. Someone even held up a sign that read, "June free the field." And for the first time since this nightmare started, I realized something had shifted. People were talking to each other, not just about my case, but about everything. About how tired they were of living under constant HOA surveillance, of having flower beds reported, or being fined for unsanctioned garden gnomes. I wasn't just the guy with the field anymore. I was the guy who'd stood up, and somehow that made it safe for others to start standing too. A woman named Julie, who lived 3 houses down and had barely ever nodded in my direction, stopped by later that day with a pie. Pecan, warm, homemade. "I voted for that rec zone extension," she admitted sheepishly. "Didn't know it meant stealing your land." "I'm sorry, Kevin," I shrugged. "You're here now. That's what matters." Julie smiled. "Some of us are talking about proposing a new HOA board, one that doesn't treat neighbors like suspects." Word spread fast. Within a week, Harold Bixley voluntarily stepped down, though rumor had it it was more of a jump before the board kicks you. His public apology, mandated by the court, came via flyer and email blast. Sunny Ridge HOA formally acknowledges its overreach into Mr. Larson's property and sincerely apologizes for the disruption and confusion. We recognize his right to private land use and thank him for his patience during this misunderstanding. I framed that one too. It hung proudly next to the laminated invoice, but the real payoff wasn't the money, though believe me, that check looked damn fine when it cleared. It was the peace that returned. The kind of peace I hadn't felt since before those cursed orange flags went into the ground. Neighbors who once barely waved now dropped by with coffee. A teenager who had once played frisbee on my lawn without asking came by with his dad and offered to mow my field just because. A retired couple from across the street invited me to their next poker night. It wasn't just the HOA that had been defeated. It was the fear that held people apart. The field was mine again, untouched, undisturbed, perfectly wild, and Sunny Ridge. They began what they called a community healing initiative, complete with listening sessions and suggestions boxes. I almost donated Greg the mannequin as their new mascot. Instead, I let him retire with honor to my workshop, where he now holds my leaf blower and wears a sign. Former security chief, successfully defended the realm. And as for those ridiculous tents, I watched one of them catch on the wind during takedown and bounce across the grass like a defeated tumbleweed, finally landing in a shallow ditch. No one chased after it. It was perfect. 3 weeks after the final tent was dragged off my land, I decided it was time to commemorate the end of the HOA saga in proper Midwestern fashion with fire, meat, and unapologetic sarcasm. I called it the Not-So-Community Cookout. Flyers went up all over the neighborhood. Free food, no HOA, no bylaws, no judgment. Bring your appetite and your worst HOA horror story. We set up grills on the edge of my field, my glorious, liberated field. Neighbors came in droves. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. Someone brought a cooler the size of a refrigerator. Even the guy who once yelled at me for letting my sunflowers grow too tall showed up with a six-pack and a sheepish grin. By sundown, we had nearly 70 people there. I turned the side of my barn into a makeshift movie screen using an old bedsheet and a borrowed projector. What did we play? The highlight reel, a compilation of drone footage, courtroom clips, and my personal favorite, HOA Officer Bixley, trying to fold up a pop-up tent and nearly smacking himself in the face with a pole. I added dramatic music. People laughed until they had to wipe tears. Then came the final act. I stepped onto a makeshift platform, an old hay bale with a not HOA approved sign tacked to it. I raised my glass and said, "Neighbors, friends, recent co-conspirators, thank you for being here tonight. We've shared a victory, but also something more important, the reminder that rules mean nothing if they're enforced without respect. Also, hot dogs are better when they're grilled on land that belongs entirely to you." Polite chuckles, a few cheers. "But there's one last thing we need to do," I added, turning toward a massive tarped structure I'd wheeled out earlier. "Some of you have asked me, Kevin, what did you do with all the HOA junk they left behind? The signs, the cones, the fake wellness path arrows." I grabbed the corner of the tarp and yanked it away with flair. Underneath stood a towering 8-foot-tall papier-mâché effigy of the original HOA sign, constructed from their old banners, broken cones, laminated flyers, and, yes, a shredded copy of that infamous invoice. The crowd gasped, then cheered, then chanted, "Burn it! Burn it!" With great ceremony, I struck a match, walked over, and lit the base of the effigy. Flames crawled upward, devouring bureaucracy and self-importance alike. As it burned, someone blasted, "We didn't start the fire," from a Bluetooth speaker. It was pure, dumb, beautiful catharsis. A little girl asked her mom, "Why are we burning the big sign?" Her mom answered, "Because Kevin won." And that was it. The story, the feud, the petty war with Sunny Ridge, it all ended in fire and bratwurst under a red-gold Minnesota sunset, just the way it should. Now, whenever someone asks about the field, I point and say, "That land was nearly stolen once, but I fought back with drones, lawyers, and passive-aggressive signage, and I've got the grill to prove it." Greg the mannequin still stands in my shed, now wearing a sash that says, "Local Hero, Rhett." The framed apology letter is in the bathroom. The HOA, they're quieter these days, calmer, smaller, and the sunset, still free.